oncologists. A number of the people from my clinical research unit only came because there was food. Then they heard that there was only refreshments, so they were a little bit lukewarm about coming, but they only came because I'm here. So welcome to the Aga Khan University Center. As you know, we opened here just a year ago. And if you come 2 weeks from now, we will have 150 students, 75 nursing students, 75 medical students. You will relive your own life from nearly a decade ago when you also were a student. This space will be filled up. You'll have no space. We had a Java here before, and then there were not enough visitors, so they closed the Java. So now we're saying that when the students come, they should open up the Java. And well, they say, well, the students cannot afford the Java. So we'll say maybe the NCI Kenya can subsidize Java so that the students can at least have a good time when they're here. So thank you for coming. Welcome. Like any inaugural event, it is really dramatic. So I'm glad that we have at least 50 people here. I hear we've got 5,000 online. Plus minus 1 0 will not make a difference. So I would like to invite the chairman of CRSK to give at least a welcome address to see what it is about, and then we'll take the program from here. So thank you.
Thank you, Prof, and for that big title, which I don't deserve. I'm here as a representative of the Clinical Research Society of Kenya, which is a platform that brings together stakeholders in the clinical research industry. It's an honor and a privilege to be co-hosting our inaugural webinar or training series together with our partner, Aga Khan University. This is the beginning of many more that are lined up. We are working towards having this series accredited as for CPD. We hope that you will walk the journey with us, and the series are part also of the roadshows that we have after the launch of the Clinical Research Society of Kenya in June to create awareness and bring all the stakeholders on board. So thank you so much and welcome on this journey. I hope you'll enjoy the discussions today. Thank you. Back to you, Prof.
They clap for you. They didn't clap for me. That's very good. So do I have my slides? Yep. So you have a couple of banners here. You have the CRSK banner. You have the Drug Called Hope, which is our motto at the Clinical Research Unit. You have Innocent, who is not here. When Innocent was with us, he looked young, well-kept. When I saw him outside, he's got a beard, he's already white. Wherever he's working, they're stressing him out. So I would ask him to come back. And there is Serish, who is our clinical research nurse manager. So I want to talk to you a little bit about this place, about what we do, and why I think CRSK is critically important in a country like Kenya, where research is really about to blossom significantly, at least clinical research in the area of cancer, which is why we have also Dr. Melly, and also we have Dr. Sitna there as well. There we are. Okay, so my title is Promoting Clinical Research in Kenya, a Time to Push Ahead. It's not that we've not done clinical research in Kenya. We have, but most of it has been in infectious diseases, TB, malaria, HIV, etc. Cancer today clearly is affecting more people than infectious diseases. And I think it is time now for us to, in a way, reconfigure what assets we put into place for research in this country specifically, where we really are the driver in East Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa for that matter. So this is the University Center where you are. This is the building where you are, the taller building. The 11th floor will be one of these days the next-in sequencing lab. The front part of the building is where we have administration, etc. The dean has his offices on the 9th floor. On the left-hand side is what you are used to when you come to AKU. There's a Heart and Cancer Center. And this was inaugurated in 2011 by Mwai Kibaki, at that time President Kibaki, and His Highness Aga Khan, the Chancellor of the university. But the history of cancer research, although we have a Heart and Cancer Center, the building, which was given by a donor, we don't really do heart research or cancer research until most recently. And the trouble we see is that if you look at the data, of the 2.7 million clinical trials conducted internationally, this was about 2020, less than 1% were conducted in Africa. And we looked at the clinicaltrials.gov from 2019, and there were 736 clinical trials conducted in Africa as a whole. 26, which is about 3.5%, were oncology trials. Out of those 26, only 6 were conducted in countries with predominantly black patients. So all the other 20 were conducted either in South Africa or in Egypt. And I know Manel is here, some of them were conducted in Tunisia. And there are no Africans in Tunisia, that's for sure. So we need to change the paradigm a little bit. So trials in African continent are predominantly conducted in either South Africa or Egypt. And part of the issue has been that, one, we were claimed as if we were not trained in clinical research. We did not have the repertoire. But also, historically, the time to activate a clinical trial was rather long. And we must admit that that is an important metric for the conduct of clinical research when you look at pharmaceutical sponsors. Yeah, so we'll talk about that. So the Chancellor Zani Zalaga Khan, when he opened up the Heart and Cancer Center, said 2 things. He said, there are 2 things, let me mention 2 investment areas that are most sadly shortchanged in the developing world. The first is research, the second is education. The intimate link between quality research and quality healthcare is well established. So part of the mission of the clinical research enterprise here at AKU is that we will do research, but also we'll do education, but in terms of fellowships, but also medical students that are coming up within the next 2 weeks. So in 2020, sometime in around August, September, we opened up the clinical research unit. At that time, we had a different government. Obviously, we had Rashid Aman as the lead person for that matter. At that time, the chief administrative secretary of the Ministry of Health opened up the clinical research unit with Dean Lukoy. We have our chemotherapy suites where we give chemotherapy. The drug called Hope is our motto. There is a fish tank, and a fish tank is every fish has a name. There's you pay $50 to name a fish, and there is a fish called Melly, but he's not paid me the $50. So here he is, trying to make sure that before he leaves that we really cash in the $50. But it's got a story. It's a really pretty place to be where you can think about the future and think about hope. And when we started the clinical research unit, you see the architectural diagram. There was an article in the Daily Nation that says, cancer research from the West won't work in Africans. Now, there is some truth to that. It's not the whole truth and not nothing but the truth. But there clearly is something about the African patient population where drugs developed elsewhere may or may not work the same way, might have more toxicity, or may have to have their doses altered a little bit to be able to be effective. We do not know that. That is supposed, for that matter. And the question is why? Why should the African population be unique in the sense that we should study drugs on African population? So we published a paper, and this was work done between us and pathology, whereby we took tissue from triple-negative breast cancer women from Kenya, from AKU, compared it to tissue from triple-negative breast cancer women in Alabama, the African-American women, and also took white women from Alabama, looked at their tissue and the messenger RNA transcript of triple-negative breast cancer from these cohorts, 3 cohorts. And there you have it. In the middle, you see Kenyan TNBC, N equal 15, small patient numbers, obviously. We looked at African-American women from Alabama and Caucasian women from Alabama. And you can see many more hotspots of upregulated messenger RNA in the Kenyan women, not present in the African-American women, not present in the Caucasian women. But the African-American women and the Caucasian women are the patients in whom drugs are tested. And my sense is, what about us? Do we really represent the paradigm that that drug will work on our patient population? And that has been the link why we say we should do research in Africa, in Kenya for that matter. So for a clinical trial to be approved in Kenya, you have a number of authorities. You have the ethics review, which is our IRB. There's a central IRB. The PPB also has IRB functions in a way. Ethics review as well as scientific review. NACOSTI provides a research permit, material transfer agreement done by the Ministry of Health, export permit by the PPB as well. And we have Stacy with us who knows all this stuff. And this is what is required to be able to conduct a clinical trial here in Kenya. And the way it works is, I sign the CDA, I get a protocol, it's sent to the scientific review committee here at AKU. So at AKU, we have a clinical scientific review committee specifically dedicated to cancer. We have oncologists, we have clinical trialists, ethicists who review the clinical trial for science, but also the ethical aspect of the science. Once we review it, it goes to our IRB, which is called the ISASERC. They review it. If they approve it, it goes to the PPB. The PPB reviews it again. scientific review, ethics review, all those things that were done will be repeated here by the PPB by different people with different criteria. Once they approve it, it goes to NACOSTI, Minister of Health, goes to trial activation. This process used to take at least a year, 12 months. The benchmark in the USA, about 90 days. MD Anderson, 30 days. University of Alabama, where I came, was approximately 90 days. So clearly, by the time we get the trial activated here, America has nearly closed the study. Japan's closed the study. South America participating in the trial. And we probably get a token or two patients to put on clinical trial. But that is because of sequential nature of clinical trial activation, at least here in Kenya. And we need to talk about that as well. But be it as it may, 2019, no clinical trials done, at least oncology trials done at AKU. 2020, we come in, establish a clinical research unit. We do the first study in tocilizumab, which was COVID. In the meantime, 2023, we have about 10 clinical trials, 6 in oncology, and 3 others in non-oncology. So is it possible? And the answer is yes. Your countrymen, my president, my former president, as you well know, his famous words was, yes, we can. And we've showed that yes, we can. But the trouble is, if we do not solve some of the issues, this yes, we can paradigm might really shrivel. And the question is, what can we do? So let me show you the data. COVID studies, 2021. We did 3 COVID trials. And at that time, same time frame, 2 years, 7 non-COVID trials, oncology, multiple sclerosis. IRC, median time was 70 days. PPB at that time, 55, NACOSTI 12, TTA, time trial activation, 78. At that time, the World Health Organization talked with EVRF, talked with governments to say, this is a lethal disease. We cannot dilly-dally about activating trials because we've got important drugs coming our way that will save lives. So there was sequential, in a way, processing of regulatory protocols. There was an express line set up to say, by the way, these trials need to be conducted. And you can see, yes, we can, 78 days. MD Anderson at that time, 30 days. Alabama, still 90 days. USA in total was 120 days. So we were really leading the way. During the same time frame, we did 7 non-COVID trials. IRC went from 70 days to 88, not bad. PPB 55 to 125, 5 times. NACOSTI stays at 12 days to 18 days. TTA 236. Same time frame, same team on our side, the same regulatory authority, but a different mindset, thinking that these diseases, predominantly cancer, are not as life-threatening as COVID. Well, COVID's gone now, and we are still left with cancer. Can we move 236 towards 78? And the question is, what will it take to do that? And that is what is required, part of the mission for CRSC 38. So what does it take? It takes a village plus, obviously, CRSK. The patient is in the middle. We all talk about it. You know, pharma talks about it, CROs talk about it, Dr. Billy talks about it. Patient, we do everything for the patient. There's a PI, he's got the research staff, and the academic center. So this is the actual actors, the doers. Pharma critical, CRO critical. Above there, you have government, and NCI Kenya is part of government. And then you have the regulatory system. All these people have to really work together for the patient to be the beneficiary of the science of today. So what we do in the CRU, the Clinical Research Unit, we are a one-stop shop. We have PIs, sub-Is, clinical research nurses, data managers, regulatory, medical records, research pharmacists, finance. You come to us as a one-stop turnkey operation. The typical model that we use in the US. That works very well. Yeah. In order to prepare for the future, we need to have more CRUs in the country, here in Kenya. What does it take to have a CRU? It takes obviously nurses, data manager who are trained, pharmacy who are trained in research drugs, investigation agent custody. You have investigation agent. When the patient brings back these drugs, it's not like you just throw them in the garbage, you just flush them down. You've got to equate how much was given, how much was returned, how much did you get, give it back, destroyed, etc. So you really have to have custody of the investigational product. SOPs have to be written, GCP has to be applied by, you have to be trained, CITI, I'll talk about CITP in a minute, and then you have to be site qualified, and there has to be an internal audit. All this is important. Now, I have many people telling me, we'd love to have a CRU at XYZ. Power to you. But this process has to be in place in order to you to do compliant, ethical, and efficient research. So the PI, everybody wants to be a PI because it just feels good. It doesn't pay you very much, but it feels good that you're a PI. But the PI is responsible for all these people, right? Because you are the person who puts the patient on a clinical trial. Anything goes wrong on the sponsor level, CRO, clinical research unit, the research team, the regulatory, you are responsible because you are the one giving the drug on behalf of the regulatory system and the pharmaceutical. You are the one who then has to assign and has to respond to the IRB. Any deviation by anybody in your team is your responsibility. And the question is a clinical investigator trained to be a PI to take the responsibility? And I would say not automatically. What does it take to be a successful clinical investigator? You certainly have to be a good clinician. You've got to be a good oncologist or nephrologist, whatever the area of expertise is. You have to have commitment to research, attention to detail, dedication to compliance, documentation, willingness to lead and take responsibility. Clinical research is not a hobby to be done on the side, on the weekend, once in a while, and certainly not a mere extension of clinical work. And a good clinician is not necessarily a good clinical investigator. So I'll give you an example. We put a patient on a clinical trial just recently. Esophageal cancer, localized disease, chemoradiotherapy is primary standard of care. If you have not progressed, if you have stable disease or complete remission, standard of care today is observation. And you know that 50% of the patients will recur. If you have a small tumor, the treatment of choice is surgery. So we get a patient, was treated someplace about 6-8 months ago with CRT, so chemotherapy, radiotherapy. The patient was called to have locally advanced disease. The physician's note, and I wish I could have shown you, but I couldn't mark off the names on there, was a one-pager. It says, patient with squamous cell carcinoma of the esophagus, chemoradiotherapy, no discussion about surgery, etc. So we go back and look at the source documentation of the CAT scan. The CAT scan shows a lesion, small lesion, does not penetrate to the submucosa, at least on the CAT scan, no positive lymph nodes. So probably localized disease, lymphadenopathy, N0 usually. We look at the pathology report, pathology says squamous cell carcinoma. So if you look at it, it really was a T1 lesion, N0, M0 by those findings. That patient should have received surgery for curative intent. Well, he received chemoradiotherapy. So he comes to us because now he's finished chemo-RT, he's got residual disease or complete remission, but really no progression. So we look at the baseline CT scan here. The baseline CT scan shows a big lesion. Time, okay, give me 2 minutes. I'm the chair, so I can think I can take liberty. Sorry. So we look at it, it is a T3 lesion, N1, M0. So we've gone from a T1, N0, M0, that showed we had surgery, to a T3, N1, M0. Now what do you do? So what do we document? That patient will probably be ineligible for study because should have had surgery at the time of initial therapy. So our documentation, what we do in the country, makes a big difference whether we become recipients of a clinical trial, because then the PI is responsible for everything else. Yeah? So we have a clinical investigator training program that we've conducted here. We started in UAB since 2016. It came to AKU Nairobi in 2021. Went to Alexandria, Egypt, 2018, went to Portugal, Nova University, 2022. This is a paradigm importance where we train our clinicians, fellows, junior faculty to become clinical investigators, to understand the paradigm of what it takes to be a PI. So what is the role, and I will end, what is the role of CRSK in this whole paradigm? How can we become better managers of research studies coming to us? How can we be the partners for pharma rather than going to South Africa or Egypt? I think CRSK should be the conduit to promote clinical research and bring together investigators, pharma, CRO, regulatory agencies. This inaugural meeting is exactly that. We have MELI, we have CITNA, we have pharma, we have CRO, we have you. Number one, done, at least for today. Promote investigator training, CITP. Roche Pharmaceutical funded us to do CITP training for 4 terms. We've trained about 150 investigators or clinicians to become investigators. So we need more funding to do more. CRSK has to promote and facilitate clinical trials coming to Kenya. How do they do that? Training of IRB membership. The IRB in this country, as well as many countries, has not seen oncologic trials. You get a bispecific antibody. Well, there is no bispecific antibody therapy for ID, for malaria, for TB. What is it? I think we need to train our IRB members to understand the science of new technology. Facilitate regulatory approval through communication with agencies. We need to get from 236 to 78 and market Kenyan investigators and institutions to pharma so that pharmaceutical sponsors know that Kenya, East Africa, is a fertile place to do clinical research. I think that is the role of CRSK. And today, being the inaugural, I told myself, together with the team, in 6 months we'll come back and say, did we make a difference? Do we have more pharma coming to us? Do we have more CITPs where investors can be trained? And are we better prepared to move the TTA from 236 days to 78? So that is a chart. That's why we have Nelly here, we have Sitna, we have others. My hope is that all of us will at least communicate to see how can we do that. And only then can we say what Obama says was true. Yes, we can. I think we are able to do that. So I thank you. All right, so we have you back? Melly? Oh, so, well, then let me introduce Dr. Melly. Well, he needs no introduction. He's an oncologist, trained at Moy, trained in Indiana, so he's trained in every place. He's now the face of the NCI Kenya. So if there are any concerns about oncology in Kenya, here's the man. Today is the day. But he will tell us about his responsibility, the role he plays, but more importantly, he trained in Indiana, one of the top 15 cancer centers in the US country. He understands research very well. He understands oncology very well, having come from Moy. So I think, Dr. Melly, welcome to you. Asante for coming. Hope you can tell us how you will change the system in Kenya to make us more responsive to clinical research here in Kenya. Thank you.
Well, allow me to greet you, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. I feel honored, and it's a privilege to be before you this evening to speak to you about what I've been doing for a while and I continue doing. And I'm also honored to make a presentation before academicians, before researchers, before us who provide care to our patients. And also it's a privilege to be before I have seen my teachers sitting here, and I have seen my colleagues, both junior and senior, and also the students who are here. It feels nice to stand before you all this evening. Professor Mansour has laid the ground. He is one of those I really admire, and I would wish to confidently confirm to AKU that you have one of the best taking care of clinical research here and education in general. Allow me to appreciate also my fellow panelists who we will be discussing this together, Dr. Njiraini Njoki and Dr. Sitna Mwanzi, colleagues that we have been in practice for a while. Without further ado, I know time is quite of essence. I am not a fan of making presentations or slides. I prefer to talk more than going through my slides. Now, my name is Elias Meli. I'm a clinical oncologist, been in practice for a while, mainly at the western part of the country, working with Moy Teaching and Referral Hospital and Moy University campus. So if there are guys here who went to school through that end, that is the environment. I've been working, taking care of cancer patients at the western part of the country, being in training, and also in research through Ampath Oncology Institute and Moy University in general. But right now, I'm here on behalf of the National Cancer Institute of Kenya. How many of us are aware or conversant with what National Cancer Institute of Kenya does? Can I see by show of hands? Interesting. Because in research, Dr. Shah, if you had to do an analysis, what would be the percentage? Probably less than 10%. The more the reason why I should be here to speak to you so that you become ambassadors and you can know that the Kenyan government is very intentional in addressing the burden of cancer in this country. The National Cancer Institute of Kenya is a state corporation. It's a parastatal. It's a semi-autonomous government agency under Ministry of Health, which was established in 2012 by an act of parliament, Cancer Prevention and Control. This is the act that then addresses the burden of cancer in this country. It was established because health in general has been a challenge, and we know that. Most of us here are healthcare workers or planning to be. But then cancer in specific required an extra attention, and more importantly, in terms of resources, so that with all the challenges that it poses, we are able to slay in this dragon. And NCI is a saga. What sagas do, then they use a multi-sectoral approach in addressing a problem. Because if you are a department under Ministry of Health, then you are limited to address the concerns at the purview of what health is. But we recognize that cancer is beyond health. Cancer, I equate it to terrorism that requires everybody, every sector, to contribute in addressing this problem. And that is why we are charged with this mandate of cancer prevention and control. We are looking at the entire continuum of care, from prevention strategies to ensuring that we have early diagnosis when we cannot prevent. So we have been doing a lot of cancer mainstreaming on risk factors of cancer, and you realize it's in the environment. And the environment is where you are. It's what everybody else is doing in any of all these sectors that we know. We also have this mandate to make sure that, this role to make sure that we, encourage screening for early diagnosis for those cancers that can be screened. For those which cannot be screened, if unfortunately it's diagnosed, we create awareness so that people can just be good in seeking healthcare, because that's the message, that when you are unwell, seek for some treatment from a healthcare facility, cascading from level 1 to level 6 of our hospitals as classified by Ministry of Health. Therefore, it is our role to make sure that there is early diagnosis of cancer. Outcomes are better if cancer is diagnosed early. And we are looking at both children and adults. Shortly, I'll share with you a few statistics to demonstrate how huge the burden of cancer is in this country. Beyond that, when you are diagnosed with cancer, we would want to guarantee you quality treatment. And I want to thank AKU for leading in innovation to make sure that we are providing only but the best care. That one, we give it up to you, and you have been really instrumental in creating that environment. Professor Lukoye was my dean, and I'm glad he's here, and I always admire when he mentions that we wouldn't want to do what everyone else is doing, but we want to do better. And that is a very good motto. And being one of the first centers to set up a cancer clinical trials unit, thank you very much, Professor Mansour. It is also a center that we are now benchmarking across the country to make sure more centers of this nature are set. And More University Clinical Research Center also is doing very well at the western part of the country. Training academia generally is leading the way. And other than confirming and giving confidence to you that NCI is out to regulate the cancer space to make sure that we get quality from diagnosis and treatment, whether with curative intention or with palliative intention. through survivorship or end of life in the event that one is diagnosed with terminal illness. We guarantee you quality. And for us to do all this, ladies and gentlemen, we have recognized that there are so many gaps in our healthcare system. Specifically in cancer, there is so many questions that needs to be answered. And the only way we can get answers is through research. NCIK is charged with a whole pillar function to answer these questions, through cancer research. We have been treating our patients using foreign data. As Professor Mansour has mentioned, it's time that we generate our own local data that is going to answer our local questions. Do we get surprised that probably sometimes we undertreat our patients or probably overtreat them? We shouldn't, because we are not originating our own local data. NCIK is going to work with every stakeholder. Thank you, Clinical Research Society of Kenya, Mr. Gilbert Ogeti, a good friend of mine, for bringing together this and for the work that you are doing through that society, because together with NCIK, we are going to work to make sure the cancer research specifically becomes a reality in this country. We answer our local questions, we treat our patients, or we generate strategies that will prevent cancer from our local data. Now, we are also charged with a mandate of capacity building towards oncology care, either at informal or formal training. And we have programs that we intend to begin as we also leverage on the existing training programs through our academic institutions, both in government and in private sector. When I see you seated here, I know I have my stakeholders, both from those who are going to deliver care, from the training institutions, and those who are conducting research. So together, we are going to work to make sure that we address this problem. And for sure, yes, we can. It is possible. We have seen it happen in other places in this world. Why not Kenya? Why not, make sure that everything is done in a very coordinated manner? So to create, a lot of fears and worries to you, let us remember that cancer is one disease that does not choose. It doesn't respect your status. It doesn't care who you are. We are all at risk, including ourselves as healthcare workers, as researchers, as academicians, as teachers. We know we have been affected directly or indirectly. We all know we have family members or friends who are going through this problem. And we keep asking ourselves, what is going on? I've been asked many times, have you found the cause of cancer? I'm sure that question is within us all the time. Dr. Njoki Njiraini here will agree with me that even with the efforts that we are putting, we are being asked about that all the time. So Globacan, which is the global body that has estimates of cancer, in 2020 estimated that there are 10 million deaths occurring due to cancer worldwide. This data, Kenya contributes into it. And in Kenya, we know cancer is the second leading non-communicable disease after cardiovascular diseases. We also know it is the third leading cause of cancer. And we know that our annual mortality has increased by 16% from 2012 to 2018. That is not good news. We know the socioeconomic impact that cancer is posing, high cost of treatment, lost man hours, and loss of life, which is quite unfortunate. This current leadership in this country is awake to the reality of UHC. And we know that we would want to invest most of our time in prevention, but cancer being a disease that originates from genetic mutation, we know that we have our unique challenges as we put in place strategies in community health and primary health care. We know very well that we'll still have to struggle a lot with preventing, cancer. because it is not one disease like HIV or malaria that you can use one bullet to shoot it. We know from our basic sciences that anything that involves a genetic aberration, genetic mutation, is different for different people because our biologies are totally different. But even then, from the economics or health economics perspective, we know if we invest in prevention, we save a lot of money that would have gone into treatment, including potentially saving lives. From our National Cancer Registry, NCI is the custodian of all cancer data in this country. And if you would want to know any form of data from whichever part of this country, I know we are a representation of the entire country here. And we quickly looked at data which is in our NACARE, the National Cancer Registry of Kenya for 2021-2022. It is not published yet, but for the sake of this presentation, the burden of cancer in this country, 5 leading cancers among the women is breast cancer, cervical cancer, and esophageal malignancies. Among the men, definitely we all know it's prostate cancer. Esophageal cancer is very close for both gender, female and male, and closely we also have pretty much GIT malignancies, colorectal cancers, and I will share these slides. I know time is quite limited. Allow me to also mention that children are not younger versions of adults. We treat them differently. They have their different unique challenges. And as we also analyze their data, the leading type of malignancies in children is leukemias, and solid tumors is brain tumors for the children. We also have lymphomas and head and neck malignancies. We have nephroblastomas, which it's actually a reflection of what we study. Now, in terms of gender, male, female, I think I've mentioned that. In terms of counties, now Nairobi County is leading in the number of cases, and for obvious reasons. This is data that is skewed based on where you seek your treatment. Nairobi has the most centers that treats cancer. It is the referral city whenever you need treatment. And this is our raw data from our National Cancer Registry. We have Nakuru, we have Kiambu. Kiambu and Nairobi pretty much are quite close. And we also have Uasin Gishu County, pretty much because of the second medical hub in this country, which is Eldoret. Now, the status of oncology research in Kenya. Quickly, we know research is a key component in cancer control continuum. We had a national cancer task force that was constituted by our former Cabinet Secretary Health, Senator Mutahi Kagwe, that looked comprehensively on the issues of cancer in this country. And they took a whole year to make their report and recommendation. And this task force had a whole chapter on cancer research. That then what they found out is there is limited emphasis on cancer research, there is significantly inadequate research funding, and there is inefficient coordination of cancer research. NCI is here to cure this problem. We are here to midwife and to mitigate these challenges. And this report was handed over to the National Cancer Institute of Kenya to implement in totality. So why oncology research in Kenya? We would want to generate awareness of clinical research by disseminating knowledge to the public and policymakers. We also want to provide learning and development opportunities for all clinical research professionals in the country. And we also want to foster collaborations between research groups and stakeholders and beyond. So this is why we would want to put a lot of emphasis on oncology research in Kenya. We did a desktop review, and as we talk about research, it is both clinical and non-clinical research, because we would also want to ensure there is the enabling environment. we focus, as much as we put focus on clinical trials, there is still so much that even a baseline survey could enable us to answer our questions, which are unanswered. Now, we did a desktop review on oncology research, cancer research. Just Google research in Kenya. It doesn't matter what kind of research. And I am being told I'm time bad. And in our inclusion criteria, the article was about any type of cancer or oncology topic. The article was about includes or focuses on human studies. Kenya is the study site or part of a multi-site study of focus of the study. The article was or is original research, whether it's clinical, trial, experimental studies, and this was for 10 years to 2017. Now, if you look at this schematic diagram, there were 80 Gray literature publication and 93 international journal publication. And since I'm going to share this, in total, we had 284 publications that we considered worth analysis. You know, and our findings were very interesting. This is just to demonstrate how much, you know, kind of cancer research we've been able to do, whether useful or non-useful, but at least an attempt, because we would really want to, you know, encourage all of us to consider research, because if research leads, then training will be better and care will even be the best. We considered this and we found out that they were, you know, research on penile cancers, oral, anal, prostate, NHL, pretty much almost all types of cancer, including ocular, you know, and of course, most of these studies were on cervical cancer for obvious reasons. People want to invest their resources where there is good outcomes. People are wondering, why should I do a study on dermatofibrosarcoma protuberans, where the public health burden is so small? You know, we want to invest our resources where there's going to be a return on investments. So cervical cancer and breast cancers were leading, Burkitt's lymphoma as well, Kaposi's sarcoma. Pretty much we know the link between funding and HIV related malignancies. If you look at the areas where most research were conducted, definitely Nairobi were on the lead, Kisumu, Uasin Gishu County, and the other counties as well. Ask yourself why. The most research studies were done at KNH, and these were at least 69. Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital had 52. Kemri had 17. The rest of their centers were, there was Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, there was Aga Khan University Hospital. You know, at least you made it to that list. We should clap for ourselves. All right, yeah, and we also have TENWEC and the AMPATH program in Moi University, where our Associate Dean Research, AKU has done a lot of work. Now, allow me to conclude by mentioning this. Definitely, we all recognize there is mismatch between cancer focal areas of research and the cancer burden. Very few studies in prostate and colorectal cancers, but a lot of studies in cervical cancer and breast cancer. And for us in Kenya, every human being diagnosed with cancer is important. And as we focus our research interest in different areas, then we should consider research interest across board. And that is why research in this country has been influenced by the donor. And we would really want to make sure that the country influences funding of research so that we can be able to, you know, have our own objectives in research be met and treat every Kenyan to be valuable. Our constitution reassures every Kenyan quality healthcare. Sio tafadhali, it is their right. So we have to make sure that we, you know, we live to that reality. Research efforts concentrated in major training and research institution. We also appreciated that. There is a need to strengthen interventional studies and clinical trials in this case. So National Cancer Institute of Kenya is keen, this is my last slide, in response to the epidemiologic shift. I know that was our topic today. There is so much interest now towards cancer amongst all non-communicable diseases because it's posing a global challenge. As the disease landscape evolves, with cancer becoming a growing concern in Kenya, NCIK proactive approach is to understand and address this shift as a key priority. A National Cancer Institute of Kenya pursuit of this path not only enhances the country's capacity to withstand the evolving cancer challenges, but also lays the groundwork for evidence-based interventions with the potential to positively influence public health. The Institute is resolutely committed to addressing this shift through research, underscoring its unwavering dedication to the nation's well-being. We are here to support you. Our work is to create that enabling environment for you to conduct research. There are activities we are going to do intramurally at NCI, but most of our activities will be extramural. It's going to be you who is going to, implement this. We are under the mentorship of the U.S. National Cancer Institute. They have done well in leading in cancer research in that area. We designate cancer treatment centers, and soon we are also going to designate cancer research, treatment centers, so that, because not every cancer treatment center is a research center. And with all the regulations that we have in place, we are very sure that we will answer our local questions soon using our research locally generated data. Thank you very much. May God bless you.
So good evening once again. So all protocols observed, I'd like to welcome all of you this evening. So in the interest of time, we have some of our panelists who have a hard stop in a few minutes, so I will introduce them. Our panelists are heavy hitters and their bios read long, but allow me to just give a short introduction and you can read more on the CRSK page. So first and foremost, I'll call Dr. Sitna to the stage. Dr. Sitna is a consultant medical oncologist working at Kenyatta National Hospital, and she has over 10 years experience. She's also a renowned researcher, and her research portfolio is growing. She's currently a clinical investigator at United. Next, allow me to call Dr. Njiraini, Dr. Njoki Njiraini. She's a consultant clinical oncologist, also based at the Kenyatta National Hospital, and she is a fellow of the College of Radiation Oncology, South Africa. She's also a researcher, and her research interests are in breast oncology, pediatric oncology, neuro-oncology, and prostate oncology. Allow me to call back on stage Dr. Meli. He needs no introduction. He is currently the CEO of the National Cancer Institute. He also has research interests, and he has been conducting health research at Ampath Oncology Institute. And last and foremost, allow me to introduce Professor Saleh. He needs no introduction. He is the reason why most of you are here, so karibu sana. All right, so we'll start with you, Professor Mansour. Thank you for taking us over the landscape of how global oncology has evolved. However, taking it back home and bringing it back to the African perspective, how do you believe that we can tackle disparities in cancer research?
That's a question for Melly. Melly, you want to take that?
Well, he's a professor, and professors are smart. They know, when we went through our training, as you begin, it's general, and you go into specifics, and ultimately, you can even study the microRNA in triple-negative breast cancers. only. But then from a policy perspective, where our role, as I mentioned earlier on, in this country is to make sure everybody is taken care of. And as I alluded, that research is going to answer our questions. And also mention how skewed research based on whoever is funding has been a challenge that then has caused disparities as we address cancer research. So it is us to be very intentional. It is us to assess our burden and know where we need to put our resources in terms of research, and this will actually address our problem. You know, I recently was meeting parliamentarians, and a senator from Marsabit County asked me specifically what is wrong in one of my villages, and mentioned the name, I've forgotten, where there is an upsurge of cancer cases. And everybody has their story, and everyone would like potentially a research to be conducted to answer questions in their individual areas. So to address this disparity in cancer research, then we need data. And data will inform where actually we need to put our efforts. And at the National Cancer Institute, if there is anything we are working and we are guarding jealously, because this will assist in planning how to even conduct clinical research in cancer or any other form of research related to cancer from any interested party who has a question that they believe it is only research that will answer. I think that would be my comment. And I know we have been in this practice, all of us, and my fellow panelists can also contribute to the same.
Thank you. So if you have any questions, kindly hold them until we get to the end, so you can just note them down. Professor Mansour, do you want to add on to this?
You can't go after the director of the NCI, can you? I mean, what are you going to say? But I think what he pointed out, and I will just say it in layman's language, one is awareness. Most cancer patients get treated at least 5 times before the cancer is diagnosed, because it goes from a common cold to COVID to TB to something else. And then finally they get to an oncologist who says, you got cancer. So awareness within the population is very critical. Then access. AKU's here's got 2 big buildings. We've got Kenyatta, we've got Moi, etc. But access to those centers, tertiary centers, is not provided, whereby we need to have intermediate centers in between where the patient can come and seek for help. So the 2 A's, access as well as awareness, is critical. And then the question is, the impact of what we do should be measurable. And that's why we have NCI Kenya. We see the data today. We see all the pie charts. 6 months from now, a year from now, we'd like to see the pie charts to say, has it changed significantly? Are we able to diagnose people better? Downstage them. So I believe that is what is important for us to do.
Thank you. So over to you, Dr. Sitna. So most patients who are diagnosed with cancer, of course, seek care in the public health system. So what do you believe, or how do you believe we can successfully integrate oncology programs in the health system as a care option for patients? So having these patients come to you, but also be involved in the research programs that we are running.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's a complex question. I think, as Dr. Meli said, cancer is not like a thing that is one disease. There are multiple diseases. So even when you talk about the public sector, it's not one institution. We have multiple levels of public health. We have the level 1, which is the primary health care. Then you have the counties, sub-counties, and then you go to the tertiary level. And when we were doing some work with the Ministry of Health, we were trying to say what kind of cancer treatment can be done in the primary care, what can be done in the middle level, and what can be done at the tertiary center, and how do we link them. So sometimes, like Prof. Mansour has said, you could have someone coming with a breast mass and they're treated for mastitis in the primary healthcare level, instead of being referred on for a mammogram in the middle level so that they can get access to care in the tertiary level. So in as much as we look at the public sector, just know that it's a complex network of different level healthcare, and many times the referral pathway is not very straightforward, and many times that's where most of the delays in accessing care actually come from. So those are the things we talk about health system strengthening, that you might be at the top of the ivory tower with the best healthcare, but if people are not getting to you, then we're not going to see a shift in those pie charts. We're not going to see a shift in those numbers of people coming with stage 4 disease. So it's a complex, but something we need to do in terms of working at all the different levels and then joining them so that patients can come to us at the right time.
All right, thank you for that. And just adding on to this, do you see a role in patient advocacy in all these treatment options that you're discussing now?
Yeah, I think one of the several levels of barriers that we have patients not knowing what it is to look out for. So we need people who have become patients to go back and say, this is what I had, and this is what led me to care. So patient advocacy from patients themselves, to tell people that they can actually get care and get better, because many times people don't come because they're afraid they're afraid of the unknown. In terms of also research, one of the things that I found interesting when I was full-time at AKU was trying to get patients to join clinical trials was also a challenge. So we have a wonderful study and we tell them, you're going to get all your treatment paid for, and there's this new drug that we're testing. And some patients are like, I don't want to be a guinea pig. So even our patient understanding of what research is, and we can use a lot of the patient advocacy groups to say, these are the things that can be helpful and that this is what research is. So I think there are many things we can do with patient advocacy in terms of improving healthcare and then improving access to research as well.
All right, thank you for this. And just splitting a little bit from this, especially as practicing oncologists, how do you feel that you as oncologists have encouraged this practice of patient seeking or patients improving their voice? For instance, many international pharma have pre-approval access programs whereby the physician is the advocate for the patient, for them to be able to participate in clinical trials or in research studies. So do you feel that this is a culture that is yet to be cultivated within oncologists within the region, or how do you best believe that this culture can be improved upon?
I mean, we had an interesting session with Prof. Mansour about research again, and one of the things that physicians asked was, what is in it for me as a physician? So I found that quite, that could be a barrier, actually, that they feel like if they're not getting anything to it, then why should they refer their patients for research? So maybe, I don't know if, Prof, you want to talk about that, because we found that very interesting. For me, I was just like, if my patient is going to access, not just standard of care, but something better, and they're going to get it for free in a situation where we're really struggling with, payments out of pocket, then why wouldn't I want that for them? But you're right, this is a barrier to accessing research.
And I don't want to take away a thing from Joki. She's going to talk about it in a minute. But, patient advocacy also depends upon not just the common person says, I have cancer, so you can convince the other common person, but the leadership in the country. Colin Powell, Commander-in-Chief, U.S. Army, invaded Libya, invaded Kuwait, etc., or at least protected Kuwait. Had prostate cancer. He came out and said, I have prostate cancer. Went to the NCI, got treated. Many of our leaders will hide, go to America, hear about it until when they come back. I tell my patients in Kenya, 90% of the treatment that I would give you at the University of Alabama or Indiana University can be given right here. Moi, KU, AKU, take it, we have it. The other 20% or 10% will tell you when we don't have it. We'll send you somewhere because we've got colleagues. So I think advocacy begins from the bottoms up, the common man, but also the leader of the country or institution who says, I have it, it's curable, I got my care in Kenya. That, I think, is important.
You can go ahead.
Well, allow me to weigh in on that as well. I totally agree with Dr. Sitna and Prof. Mansour that it is a barrier. Now, I attended 40th anniversary of the first participant who was enrolled in a clinical trial that was the standard practice-changing trial in treatment of seminomas by Professor Larry Einon from Indiana University, a gentleman who was sent from Chicago to Indianapolis when he had gone through 5 lines of treatment, first line, second line, third line. You know, from the medical oncology space here, we poison people with chemicals all the time. Fortunately, we would wish to align our treatment based on evidence, and that evidence is there. One challenge that we've had in our country that we're also creating awareness is using standardized treatment across board. And this is one role that National Cancer Institute is going to play going forward, that the ministry has developed policies, protocols, guidelines, but then they need to be implemented equally because these are developed by ourselves. And just since our patients are uniquely different, be at the control of the treating oncologist, but then we have general guidelines so that if a patient would benefit from a clinical trial, it doesn't matter whether you're getting treatment from Busia or from Wajir, but then we know there's an opening of a clinical trial at AKU or at UON or at MOI or at NCI, and we create awareness that this might actually cure you. This patient who left Chicago to Indianapolis, when he saw Dr. Larry Einon, he wondered whether, can this doctor really cure what, many oncologists, renowned in the world. So he downplayed the gentleman, but that actually became his luck, and the guy is alive now, 40 years down the line. So clinical trials, honestly, plays a very big role. Let us create that advocacy. It is as the doctors, as you've said, we are not going to ask what is it in it for me. As an oncologist or as a physician, it is what is it in it for the patient at that time.
Thank you so much. So, Dr. Njoki, are you okay to take the next question? All right, I'll give you a bit of time. So, I'll go over to you, Professor Mansour. We're talking about all these research studies. But what are we doing, or what are you doing, because you're on the spot, to ensure that there's post-trial access of these innovations to, the study participants? Cancer does not stop at the end of the trial. So what are we doing to ensure that these participants have continued care throughout the spectrum?
Melly, you should be sitting here. I think those are all those questions that are for the government and for the regulatory agency. The one thing we must say that on a clinical trial, no clinical trial stops after the study is closed. Patients who have benefit, stable disease, improve on the study, they will get their drug for the lifetime until they progress. So one thing is for sure, the drug is available. The question we're asking is, when can the drug that was showing positive findings in Kenya become regulatory approved in Kenya to be available by the NHIF, etc.? Now that's a different question. That drug may be approved in the US. Clearly, the regulatory agency and how we get drug approval in Kenya is a matter of both the public sector, i.e. the government, the PPB, the NCI, and those are things we need to, I think, figure out how to do better so that those drugs that we study here that seem to have benefit and have been shown to be accessible in the West are available to us. And maybe Dr. Melly can explain how that process works, because many drugs that are FDA approved aren't available here, and we have to get special regulatory approval to get the drugs in. They do come in, but it's a different pathway.
Okay.
Yeah, I know it's been quite a challenge, and we recognize that as a country. But as we create more awareness on cancer activities in this country, this will also cease being a challenge, because the more the barriers on our way, if we are focused in actually improving the outcome, we should work on removing the barriers. And this is one barrier. We've discussed many times on these regulatory issues, both for clinical research and also availability of drugs approved by FDA. And remember, we do not have very strict approvals internally as Kenya. We rely on approvals which are regional or pretty much US or European or Asian, who they have been going beyond clinical trials to actually manufacture these drugs. But there is a ray of hope in this country that our current government is so alive to the fact that we should manufacture what we can possibly do. So as the clinical trials come to an end, we should move it now to development of these drugs. And there is ambitious innovative programs which are in the pipeline to respond to this, and it's just a matter of time. You know, our leadership at the Ministry of Health is very keen to make sure that they create this environment, and the regulatory approvals are going to be something of the past soon, because we have created so much awareness. I'm sure those people who began treatment, give it to the legends, Professor Abinya and the rest who started cancer care in this country, they have seen tremendous changes currently, including, you know, access and affordability. You know, the other challenge that we have is new drugs, which are, you know, the new frontiers in cancer care. Of course, the cost is a limitation, and we know that if you can't afford, then you can't have it. Our national social health insurance scheme is also still limited in, you know, developing some packages that includes the new frontiers in cancer treatment, mainly both in radiotherapy and also in immunotherapies and targeted therapies, and even some chemotherapeutic agents. So it is a challenge. We are alive to it, and there are strategies towards this.
Thank you. So, Dr. Njoki, better now? Okay. So, as an early career researcher, my question is two-pronged. How do you believe, as African or Kenyan researchers, we can be empowered to take up more oncology research? And taking a step back from this, what more do you believe needs to be done to stop just concentrating on pharma-led or industry-led studies and having more local talent-led studies?
I really shouldn't have coughed before, because I feel this would have come before. And maybe Sidna talked about eating and I went off on a tangent. Anyway, so to answer your question, I think I'll start with the second part. Okay. Might be the easier one. I think as a country, we do not have a culture of research from undergraduate, postgraduate. As a matter of fact, you interact with research when you're doing your community service in undergrad. In postgraduate, it's more of it's a hurdle. I want to finish this so that I can graduate. So the culture of actually doing research. And the culture of doing research is because I think we have lacked mentorship, that's one. Second, seasoned researchers who you interact with every day, such that when you have a research question, I don't get overwhelmed with the task of how am I going to do it. It's step by step, what is the procedure to do that. I think we, as you say, take a step back. We also have to start nurturing the younger researchers. For example, we interact with medical students in KNH. And I keep asking, like when they come for their short rotation in oncology, because it's very brief, so they never get introduced to oncology. They see oncology as this dark place at the end of the hospital where you're sent, you know, for your rotation and you quickly get out. There's no sparring of interest in oncology, that's one. I think many of them want to be oncologists because they'll see the high-flying oncologists who maybe have nice cars, nice life. They're always at a conference.
You guys?
Not the ones who are here. So it might be that we need to, I think, talk to the younger people, especially to introduce them into research. Secondly, our seasoned researchers are very busy with many things, so there is no formal way of introducing people into research. Prof. Mansour might just hit me on the head. There's some assignment I'm yet to finish. But the CITP training, I think, was so key in getting people into the culture of research and demystifying research. So I think that might be a starting point even for people who are either finishing their postgraduate training or through postgraduate to be guided on that. And then to answer the first one, early career investigator, I think, is anyone who... within the first 10 years of your qualification, whether it's your undergrad or your postgrad, again, because that culture of mentorship through the research process is not there. For example, I'll tell you, most of us trained out of the country, so we were in centers where we ran clinical trials. That might have been the only time that we got introduced into clinical trials. For people who are training in Kenya, now is when we are starting to get clinical trials, so it's not something that has been there. Secondly, I think when we think of epidemiologic studies, we have to think of who, when, what, where, and why. And to answer those questions, it's a stepwise process that someone guides you through that. So that if we're having a question like, we've seen patients in our breast clinic who are having hormone receptor positive, they're not responding so well to chemotherapy. So that's a research question, but who sits and refines that question so that we go through the process? There must be a formalized way of doing that. Thirdly, I think the mentorship part, and I keep going to that, we don't have a formal mentorship process where if I meet somebody and they tell me, oh, hello, Dr. Njoki, nice to meet you. I'm interested in research. And then I'm like, okay, good, cheers, that's very nice. But what format is this that we're using to introduce people into research? Because I feel if we don't have that, then we lose even people who had interest. And there are other more interesting things apart from that. That being said, we're having more and more centers that are starting not just phase 3 clinical trials, but getting into the culture of actually doing research. And I think if we move towards that, then we can have working groups. For example, we work in breast. We have a working group in breast. There's a working group in pediatrics, a working group in prostate, so that we can answer those research questions and not just at one center. Because in the public sector, we are all facing the same problems. We can answer them at a multi-center area. But the other big problem is funding. So you talked of pharma-led trials. Research costs money. The money has to come from somewhere. So of course we look to Dr. Melly, because out of his big budget, I'm sure he can put a few $100 million for cancer research. And we'll be very happy. We'll give him a lot of proposals. So that formalized way of where to access funding. I think in KNH, we have a research fund. I think we got some of our work funded, which then if there's a way that you can get money to pay for what you need to do, then even investigator-led studies can be done. And in the same way, we then can approach pharma with investigator-led trials so that they're not dictated by pharma as to what we need to answer. Thanks.
Thank you for this, because it's building on to the next question for Dr. Melly, which was from an NCI perspective. What are you doing to complement international funding, especially when it comes to research? Is there any local funding? Are there any programs that are built that researchers can tap into?
Well, thank you, Angela. Frida, sorry. It is the elephant in the house. Funding, money is what enables us to afford anything, including food, including dressing. In cancer care is research, that it should be a basic need that should lead. And as we create more awareness and sensitization, as the burden of cancer increases in this country, people then get to appreciate why they should invest here. I had mentioned earlier on that yearly it's estimated that we have 42,116 cases specifically of new cancer cases in this country, and 27,092 specifically are dying every year. So pretty much 70% of our new cases, we lose them by the end of the year. Quite a sad story, to share with anybody. And this is the information that I keep, belaboring. Those who allocate resources, into activities in this country, which is the National Assembly. And I've had a couple of meetings with them to create sensitization specifically to invest in cancer research and create funding. You have seen a lot that has been going on, even in social media, and even the National Assembly agitating towards creation of Cancer Fund, which is being accepted universally. And as this Cancer Fund, which will be used in cancer prevention and control, becomes entrenched in our act, then the government will not have a choice but to invest in it. But humble beginnings. When I joined the National Cancer Institute, since its inception, we've never funded research. But this year, we have some funding that we are going to roll out, in small bits, and because there is you can conduct research worth 20,000 shillings, can you? And you can conduct research worth 50 million Kenyan shillings. Is that correct, Professor Mansour? So we are going to roll out, some grants. It is going to be competitive. We're going to set up a research advisory council that is going to consider applications, and we would want this funding to go into useful research that is going to answer questions that we are all going to think about, so that in the next financial year, I can go back to the National Assembly and ask them, look, you gave me X amount. This is very useful research that we did. We answered these questions. Could you make it 5 times? And we will solve a lot of the challenges that we have. So we are actually having this as a priority. Already, there is something that is going on. There's going to be more in the pipeline. We have begun, and I trust that putting our heads together collaboratively as we continue relying also on our international partners, on Big Pharma, because they also have their interests. So they will have to continue investing in research in this country because they're also in business. Ourselves, we are interested in service delivery. So as we all work towards meeting our independent individual goals, our patients will also benefit.
Thank you so much for that. So I'm about to invite you for your closing remarks, but just as the Clinical Research Society of Kenya, we are trying to also invest in the next crop of researchers, the next crop of investigators. Therefore, I'm just taking Dr. Njoki's point that there are people who are interested, but they do not know where to start. So it's just an onus onto you that when they come knocking, kindly open the door and, usher in the next crop. So I'll just invite the closing remarks before we take our Q&A. Dr. Sitna?
Yeah, thanks. I think this is an excellent beginning for the society, and we are looking forward to further collaboration and spreading the message that we can actually do this in Kenya. We should do it in Kenya. We have to do it in Kenya because our problems are ours and we need to be able to resolve them ourselves.
Thank you. We'll come knocking. Dr. Njoki?
Mine is excellent start. I think we need to keep having this conversation so that it's not a one-off thing. We have to keep having the conversation. And again, linking people with other people, because I don't think we can do research alone. So you need support. So we have to keep talking and networking so that we can make it work. Thanks.
Thank you. Dr. Meli?
Thank you very much for making my work easier because I'm the one who is answerable to the people. And the answers are originating from all of you here. My work is just to coordinate everyone to do, research that goes into cancer prevention and control. So, Clinical Research Society of Kenya, good job for, pioneering, AKU, being part of this inaugural meeting and supporting, sponsoring it. We really appreciate. We will continue working together closely and let us do it.
Thank you. And to our host for the night?
I think we all have said that we have to turn on the research gene in our youngsters. Medical students, residents, junior faculty. CITP is something we do, and Njoki was a recipient of it, so was Sitna. I think we should all inculcate the way to educate our youngsters and even junior doctors about what research is about. It is exciting. It's a bug that once you catch it, you will not want to be relieved of it. So let's do CITP. Let's fund that kind of education for our youngsters. And if we do that, they will come up with the questions they need to ask that are relevant for our patients. I think I would propose that. And maybe CRSK should then come ahead and fund the next CITP that we can take people from all over Kenya to be able to educate them to become investigators. Yeah.
Thank you. So I'll take 3, maybe 4 questions maximum, if there are any around the room. Yes, please.
Thank you, CSRK, for organizing this great evening to have a discussion on research. My name is Dr. Abed from KTRH. First of all, I'd like to thank Professor Saleh Mansour for introducing CITP. I was lucky to be among the first group of the people he trained back in Alexandria in 2018, together with Professor Walid Arafat. I think it really opened my mind. From then, we have been doing a lot of research with my Professor Walid Arafat, where we used to write many papers, we answer questions and everything. So I'm glad now the program is here in Kenya, so more people can access it. And even more, we are even conducting the clinical trials. So I have 2 questions. Number 1, my first question is, how can we prevent Me Too clinical trials? Because I heard Dr. Sitna mentioning, like at least now our patients are having opportunity to access drugs which they cannot get for free of charge. But do these trials meet the standard of care which is required, or the standard which have been set for the clinical trials? Otherwise, we'll end up doing Me Too clinical trials just because people are doing it and we're also doing it, yet they might not benefit the most. So how can we set strategies to make sure that we are doing the right clinical trials which are benefiting the patient, not only benefiting the sponsor of this clinical trial? Number two, how can we prevent research parasitism in Kenya? Because as a young nation, other people might take advantage of that, so there might be a lot of research parasitism. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Sitner, the first question was, how do we ensure the right clinical trials are conducted in the region?
Yeah, I think that's an important question. I think maybe you may have misunderstood. When I said standard of care, most of the clinical trials, if you're going to test it against an interventional drug, one of the arms would be standard of care, right? And then you would have the investigational arm. That's where I was coming from. So at least whichever arm you're randomizing, you're not getting inferior treatment. In terms of how do we choose the clinical trials, right now we may not have much of a choice if a sponsor comes with a specific one, unless we are doing investigator-initiated trial. I think some of the trials we've been involved in have been very targeted, so you have to have a specific signature for you to be part of the trial. So, and that's a global trial. If we are going to do localized trial, we have to go back to what Dr. Melly was saying about knowing our data and then choosing what are the things we're going to focus on and what are the important aspects of the clinical research we want to focus on. I don't know if I've answered that question.
Maybe just to add to that, I think the other thing to think about is for many of our patients, especially in the public sector, we already have a problem with what is our standard of care. And I'll point out that we don't have access to PD-L1 inhibitors. We may not even have access to like dual blockade for HER2. So sometimes being on a trial will also raise the standard of care that the patient is getting. So it may not be a really Me Too. It's a way for us, for patients to be able to access some of these drugs. Then to answer the second question, which was not for me, Prof, of course, will mention on this. I think the mentorship has to come into play. I think my concern, and most of the time, is that you have a brilliant question, you know how you want to answer this question, but you want to win alone. So you do not bounce this idea off your peers or other people who might be looking out for your interest. Unfortunately, in the world, there are a lot of people who do not want to do the work, but want to take all the credit. So after you've done everything, I want to be first author, I want to be last author, and you didn't do the job. So I think that's where now the mentorship and your linkages will help you to kind of, quote unquote, protect you from parasitism. Prof?
I think even Me Too questions have relevance for us. And I'll give you an example. We put 10 patients on a multiple sclerosis study here at AKU, and in fact, 6 of the patients came from outside AKU. There were 182 patients around the world. They wanted to study minority African patients, dark-skinned, because this drug happened to probably have a predilection to work better in dark-skinned patients, not because of the skin, probably because of some pharmacogenetic. Of those 10 patients in Kenya, 8 of them were women, because MS is more common in women. We were able to see that women come to clinical trials earlier than in North America because they have no access to other drugs. The number of T1 lesions in the brain, much higher. The EDSS score, which is the morbidity score of MS, much higher for Kenya. So in just 10 patients, we were able to show that this unique subpopulation clearly has a different biology. It wasn't Me Too, but we asked a specific question. And those 10 patients out of 182 today have led to another trial to say, do the ocrelizumab trial in MS in Africa, because this patient population is different than the one that is published for. But that question is to come from us. And I'll give you one very quick question. Example, tocilizumab is approved for severe COVID. You know, we did a study here, it was our first study at AKU, but tocilizumab is expensive. Not everybody could afford it. So we went and said, what if you irradiate the lung? Njoki does this for a living, for lung cancer, for breast cancer. We give 100th of the dose that you give the lung cancer to the chest in a COVID patient. Can you sterilize the microenvironment? The answer was yes. We're able to identify 3 cytokines, very cheap, CRP, ferritin, and I think was one third one, I forget. Very cheap in terms of, we didn't ask for sophisticated biomarkers. In the 10 patients, we were able to show that if those 3 biomarkers were elevated, that patient will not respond to LDRT, needs tocilizumab. If those 3 biomarkers were in the normal range, low-dose radiotherapy, $20, was as effective, if not more effective, than tocilizumab, $6,000. Those are the questions we can ask as an add-on to what we find. So I think that is the ingenuity of the individual like you who was inspired by CITP to ask those particular questions, specifically in our context.
Thank you so much. That answers you. We have one question at the back, but as we take that question, I have a very interesting question from the online audience. And they ask, what is the role of culture, or rather food and herbal therapies in the treatment of cancer? So I'm not sure who I can throw that to.
It's a very, it's, you know, like when you tell a patient you have cancer, the next thing, Daktari, what should I eat?
Yeah.
And sometimes you're like, you know, you have bigger problems. Yeah, one of the things that commonly happens, especially when you talk to our patients, is in their support groups, they're told about you're not supposed to eat meat, you're not supposed to eat eggs. You know, they have a long list of what you're not supposed to do and what you're supposed to do. Majority of those, we have not been able to say that this specific one is going to be harmful to you or this specific one is going to be helpful to you. But I think we as clinicians need to be able to discuss this, you know, openly. I recently had a patient who was being treated outside the country, and they came back with a list of drugs. So one of them was a chemotherapy drug, but all the rest were, you know, they went to is it an Ayurvedic doctor? And there was a list of like maybe 15 drugs that they were supposed to take in addition. And so so they said they felt better because they were on this treatment, but obviously the PET scan was worse. So, I mean, we have to be cognizant that our patients are going to be doing these herbal treatments or alternative treatments or complementary treatments and address them. But we know that for most of the time, majority of them might make them feel better, but may not necessarily have, you know, an impact on their disease. But it's something that we should definitely be open to discussing with them.
All right, thank you. The question at the back, please.
Allow me to respond to the second bit on herbal. That is an opportunity that we may sometime be missing out. In February, we had an inaugural cancer summit in this country, which was very successful, and some of us might have attended. We invited all the stakeholders in cancer care, including those who are providing alternative medicine in cancer treatment. And there were herbalists, there were, you know, the representatives of Pastor Ezekiel's and the rest who are praying for people towards healing. We did appreciate that spirituality is part of care. And it may not directly be what will, you know, influence the changes at the DNA, but then it has a role. So we, from the National Cancer Institute, are taking this approach of, instead of castigating, you know, let us collaborate with them. Let's ask them what do they know that we think it can lead. We know a lot of our drugs originate from herbs, from barks, leaves, and roots, and all that. You know, as Professor Sika is working towards setting up, you know, a comprehensive research center, and as we continue conducting trials, this should originate to drug development. And if we bring these guys close, they might be having whatever they are using, which actually could be having some, you know, therapeutic effect, but it's not packaged in a way that it will provide, you know, cure for what can be cured, but then it may even cause more toxicities because it's not been studied, and that is why we are alive to conducting research from phase 1 all through to phase 4 so that they can know their value. They can actually contribute into development of drugs which will be patented, and we can even help them because they will have their property rights on this. So we welcome them. They have a role. Let's talk, let's discuss with them instead of condemning them. And remember, we cannot regulate that space. It is under, you know, a different ministry completely. You know, you mentioned culture. It's under that culture, you know, state department. But as the government realigns itself, I think it should be regulated as well. These are things that we are discussing.
I think that's a brilliant suggestion for the regulators. If there are any in the room as well, do we have room for herbal or alternative therapies? So there was a question at the back. I'm sorry. Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. I hope I can remember my question. Sorry, my name is Anne Mwiriki. I'm a hematologist. Sorry, my voice is kind of going. I want to thank the panelists and also to thank Dr. Nelly in his role as head of NCI. It's interesting that you tell us that NCI has never sponsored a trial, but will start, and we really encourage that. But I want to just pinpoint that little fact as kind of pathognomic of what research, clinical research in Kenya has been like. Because if our leadership institutions do not support our own research, it begs the question, how is everyone going to paddle around the pool without any help from the leadership? I also say this because I think it's great. Prof. Mansour has brought lots of trials here which we can enjoin, but in the question about our own homegrown research, I know there are many pockets of work on aflatoxins, there are many pockets of work on this and that and the other, which all seem dead in the water, but I don't know. I think there could be a lot of merit in them if there was an organization that could, give people a radar, to bring their work to fruition, and to prove a hypothesis, that kind of thing. So it's kind of a statement rather than a question, but I hope that under your leadership, the NCI can be really strong and reach out to all the little researchers and make a difference for our own homegrown research.
Thank you very much. That's a comment, it's a statement. We are actually going to work with everybody, and as we work towards prevention, we all know there are so many risk factors out there, but we need to validate whether they are actually the single most cause of cancer, so that then we can develop policies that can be adopted across board. And that is our role. We will do what is humanly possible to lobby towards conducting, and I mentioned useful research from the word go. Where is our biggest burden? Where is our biggest public health burden? And where is, the biggest scale in terms of numbers, so that we invest where the return on our investment is going to be worthwhile. So watch this space, let's work together, and let's make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to dispel the myth that there are any little researchers, I think anyone involved in research is doing a big job. We have one more question here.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My name is Rose Munge. I'm a pediatric hematologist, oncologist. Let's say recently returned to the country. I think if I look around, I may be the only pediatrician in the house. Am I wrong? And I'm certainly the only pediatric hematologist in the house. It's just a small observation. A lot of the research in oncology so far I've seen, at least here, is very adult-oriented. Understandable, because the pediatric oncology population is quite small. So what I'm requesting or asking is if there could be support, because you come back and you want to do something, but the field it seems a bit daunting. Part of it is the mentorship that Dr. Njoki had talked about before. And two, honestly, children tend to not have advocacy until someone stands up for it. So I'm just requesting the NCI and Aga Khan and the Clinical Research Society to remember that there's a little population of babies, and for a lot of pediatric oncology, there's really good outcomes out there. Our numbers here are appalling. So I'm hoping that with time, we'll be seeing a difference in that space.
Thank you for such a powerful statement.
If I may, Rose, just to add, there is a very vibrant research group in pediatrics in KNH. So I think coming back, it's to find your people, find your North Star. For now, it might be in KNH, and I think particular interest there, I think there's already a research group working on Wilms. They're looking at the leukemia patients, and we're also looking at pediatric radiotherapy. So if you have interest, I think that would be a start. And then the same group works with the team in Kijabe and in MTRH. Yeah.
Like she said, her door is open. So if you need the connect, you can go through us at the CRSK, and we'll be sure to make that connect.
Allow me to also mention that today in the morning, for 3 hours, we were discussing about childhood cancers and data. And we are intentionally going to support development and strengthen childhood cancer registries in this country, and including, we have a limitation on population-based registries for children because of the numbers. And we have 6 centers in this country that predominantly have the capacity to treat children. As I said earlier on, children are not the smaller version of adults. They have specific needs that needs to be addressed. So we will also, encourage and support. On 13th of September, I think we are having a meeting which NCI is part of, at Ngong Hills Hotel, where we are discussing pediatric oncology and research-led. So there is hope. Be motivated as you come back home that you will get all the support. I know that kind of a feeling. Most of us who trained outside, we always wonder, is there anything good? But then as we, get entrenched into the system, we realize we are the ones who will be the change.
Thank you so much. One last question from the gentleman.
Yes, thank you. I'm Dr. Boni Ale. I'm a CEO of a small growing organization called Health Data Acumen, which is a Pan-African clinical research organization offering 2 types of services, which is the global health research activities services and also the capacity building services. Because when I hear about mentorship, we have a particular mentorship program, which is called Data and Research Mentorship Program. And right now we are under our mentorship 27 physicians and nurses and nutritionists from Kenya, where we have trained them in clinical research methodology, and the course is called ECOM. And I'm also a research physician, a resident physician at KNH, and Dr. Sidna is one of my lecturers. I'm very much interested in research, and I've done research for the last 9 years and came back in clinical practice because have to generate our own research project is something that is very in the heart of what I'm doing. And I'm really happy to hear that this is the kind of discussion we are talking here. My question here is about, because I work on Ebola vaccine trial where the community engagement strategies are very meaningful and very important when you want to come to clinical trials. And what's the place of community engagement, the anthropological aspect of research in Africa? Because we cannot involve the community in clinical trial without understanding the anthropological aspect. What's the place of that community engagement in the clinical trial when it comes to oncology? Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, Dr. Meli, today you have very many questions, but before we come to you, I'll give the question to Dr. Njiraini.
I think Dr. Sidna, since it's her student, the point is, I think there's a lot of engagement, and as Prof. Mansouri and Dr. Meli spoke about, there are multiple levels of engagement that we need to have. I think the solution might not be one answer. We have to engage with the members of public. I think, falling back on like the HIV times, the dark times, we engage the public. You talk to any person, they knew what are the key messages. Unfortunately, in cancer, we don't have a single messaging like that. But now if you ask anybody in any family, they know somebody who's had cancer. That's the first start. We have awareness. Second is now getting people to know what is cancer, what is available for treatment. As we speak, if any cancer patient walks into your office and like, can I get the cyber knife? Because that's what they've had. Yeah. Thank you to the people at KU, but they think that's the magic bullet. It might not be, but it's about the wording, the messaging that we're giving to people. So even for research, if the healthcare providers already need demystifying of research, then you can imagine how we are with the public sector and how do we package this information so that they know where trials are. If you're to stay in the US or in the UK, one of the questions the patient will ask you right from the bat, is there a trial I can get on? Mm-hmm. In Kenya, trials are like when everything has failed. Yeah. Even now we're having a problem referring patients for the breast trials because they're like, why do you want to send me to a trial? They don't understand the value of being on a trial. So we have to keep continuing with that messaging, I think.
Dr. Meli.
Yeah, so again, during Mashujaa Day this year, we will have launch for universal health coverage. And the primary care networks in every little village are going to be assisting in this messaging, creating awareness. Part of the curriculum that trained them was contributed by NCI, so that we can package very simple messages on creating awareness in the community. We do recognize that behavior change model worked in HIV, and there is an element that it can also work in cancer by just creating awareness on lifestyle, the basic things that we know that makes a huge difference. And as we have these community health promoters, since we are the high-tech trained healthcare workers from AKU and wherever, but we will not really engage the community directly. We engage them at care level. But if we really have to invest in prevention, understanding that cancer is causing, both physical, social, psychological, spiritual, burden to us, I totally agree that we have to engage the community from the start, creating awareness on prevention, and also including creating awareness on what kind of care will you get from where. It is very important. Very few people have knowledge about not until when I came to NCI, and as I asked earlier on here, how many of us knows what is the role of NCI? Just know it's a reflection of what's happening in the community. There are so many people that do not know what's going on in this country. And having those guys who are with the people in the community, giving them simple messages is one of the success stories. Let's just hope that this strategy is going to be sustainable.
Thank you so much. All right, so this closes the end of the Q&A session, and I want to yield the floor to Gilbert. But before I do that, I just want to ask for a round of applause for a very engaging panel. Thank you so much. My name is Frida Mwendia, and I am a clinical researcher and a member of the Clinical Research Society of Kenya. So I hope you had a good evening.
Wow. Thank you, Frida, for a sterling job. Well done. I see we have a standing moderator for CRSK and our stakeholders. Thank you so much for the panelists for your insightful comments and for your contributions, and a lot of talking points. We'll take up some of the ideas that came up and relay them to the relevant organization. So the discussion is just starting and will continue. Thank you to AKU and to all the attendees online and in person. Much appreciated. This is the beginning of many. And please provide feedback to CRSK on what topics you want us to discuss on matters clinical research. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
And just two last things. One, we'd like to get a group picture, if that's okay, so everyone that's here will just take one from up here. And then second, we have refreshments outside in the same area where we had refreshments before the session. Thank you.
Would you be able to take a picture here?
Recording stopped.
picture.